Hey, it's Drybear, and it's patch day for Megabonk. Keep in mind that it's a solo developer, but there's some new things coming in, some passives reworked for classes and characters, and some stuff to check out that are new features in the game as well, so let's dive in. And again, it's a solo developer, which means he has to, like, test, verify, QA check, and process everything himself by himself, so keep that in mind and kind of temper your expectations on that thing. But he says, that's it for now, thanks for playing and all the feedback. I realize there's still a lot of balancing that people want to see, so more about the weapons, the tomes, and bringing some of that together. There is some balancing in this patch, but there's more that they would like to do to get that covered. Keep in mind, I'm just a single person working on this, so I can do so much every week. Next week, I might try to do some new content for Halloween if they can get it done, so kind of put that in the back of your mind that that might be coming. First up, there is now a full-on map with Fog of War, so you can see where you've been and where you haven't. On PC, obviously on PC, there's you hold tab for this here. So now this is on the screen as well. You can see that as I move around, it's now discovering the map. It keeps track of the items you have on the ground, the chests, the pots, the shrines, all of the different power-ups and things like that. You can see it on the map, and as you can explore, you can see where you've been and where you haven't. This is massive. It tells you how big the map is, but also allows you to keep track of where special things are or if you've forgotten to get something. This is just a really nice quality of life that I'm super glad that they added to the game that should just make runs a lot more enjoyable as you have it available. So again, you can have it down or you can bring it up and you'll be able to see it on there by holding the tab key. Next up, they added a particle option for changing particles. This is super important for when you're really, when you're going for like, you know, 100K plus score runs where there's just explosions and drops and consumables and projectiles all over the screen. The intensity gets so bright that you can't see anything, and it gets super hard. I mean, when you're in the final swarm, you're being thrown around like a bouncy ball, it doesn't matter, but obviously the rest of the time you want to be able to see if you can grab stuff on the ground and actually just be able to see gameplay clarity. So they added a particles opacity option. So you actually set this to 0 if you want. You'll just see the damage numbers and the particles will go away. So you actually like, play around with this and slide it around, which is super cool. Next, we got some DX12 support being added. They do recommend, as you can see, so support for running DX12. DX11 is still recommended, but when you launch the game now, you'll see that there is a DX11 option, but you can also play in DX12. Just means that they're expanding the repertoire, adding in new support for different, you know, things that can make the game more varied and diverse, which is really big for a solo developer to be able to have in there, but that is now an option when you launch. If you're experiencing any crashes, run DX12 might help with that, just because if you're running kind of in some blockers, you can get around them by changing the DirectX, you know, option there. There should be a Steam pop-up that shows up with a booted game, allowing you to choose. If it's not showing yet, try restarting Steam just to get that update. If you run your game in DX12, graphical features will be broken, like AO and color grading and things like that, but it just gives more options for that. Next up, the Silver Tome now has a toggle on it. So this is kind of interesting. The Silver Tome is obviously only for meta progression, right? Silver inside of a single run does nothing for your character or your progression. So having that as an option that keeps rolling in the RNG as part of something that's not really gameplay oriented is kind of frustrating. So they just decided to cave, and then now they have this toggle here. So typically when you have the toggles, you can only toggle things that you've unlocked, and all the base ones are forced to be part of the pool regardless. However, in this case, they just made it so Silver Tome is toggleable. I imagine once you have everything you need, or even once you like have most of what you need unlocked, and then you decide that you just want to make better runs now, you can toggle this off. But the fact that this isn't part of gameplay, it has no gameplay impact at all during a run, makes this a little bit of a good candidate to exclude even if you don't have everything unlocked. The next thing that was changed is charge shrines are now a teal color instead of the same green. This is actually super useful in combination with the new map that you can bring up, the map overlay, because see, like we have this like magnet shrine right here, the Shrine of Suck, which is green, and then now we have these charge shrines over here, which are going to be this light teal color. Hopefully colorblind people don't struggle with this, depending on your style of colorblind. But if you're looking to get those free stats from the charge shrines, having that as a different, you know, moniker for there, I mean, can you imagine if like the unlocked chests that drop were still the same color or shape as the golden ones? You know, just having more specificity there, I think, is a good thing. So we're having that as an option. Fixed an issue where the hero Starter Corrupted Sword would not scale with size properly in some cases. Money particles move faster now during the final swarm, so that you can still pick them up while running, so they're not like chasing you. Especially when you get the mega swarms, you're being launched at such high speeds that sometimes they just don't keep up with you at all. So it's kind of nice when you can actually get those caught up with you as well, which is really cool. So that's a nice little cleanup. Next up, let's talk about the game balance and changes to that as well. There's obviously been a disparity between the characters as it stands right now, and which characters are good, which characters are bad. All of that comes down to primarily their passive, a little bit their primary weapon, but mostly their passive as well. So getting some balance on the characters is super crucial. So the first one is Fox has had the luck gain increased by double. So it used to be 1% luck every time you level up as Fox. Now it's 2% luck every time you level up as Fox. Technically, from like a systemic level, luck doesn't give you any actual power, unlike the other ones which give crit damage or scaling and things like that, but it does, right? Because obviously if you get higher rarity rolls on the options you get when you level up, even when you're opening shrines and chests, that does give you more power than if you had less luck, but it's a little bit indirect in how we think about it. So increasing that just means that Fox was underperforming, and so now you just double the amount of luck per level. Birdo's passive was kind of a troll before because again, it didn't provide any power. Like there was no major gameplay element on your efficacy or throughput that made Birdo more interesting as a choice to make, because he could just float in the air, which I guess you could make an argument that maybe he didn't need as much movement speed or as much extra jumps, but that didn't really matter when it comes down to how much can you kill and how fast can you kill. So now they're making it so that Birdo now gains 1% airborne damage per level in addition to being able to float. So up to this, and you hit level 50, that's 50% damage while you're in the air, and he can float while in the air. So that's a really awesome change. It means that now he has a cool passive that allows him to fly because he's a bird, and because when you're doing that, you get more damage. It means he's a lot more viable and interesting. Also seems that Bush was underperforming too. So you actually get Bush there on that front. Random enemies are marked. The mark element now happens more often, as you can see. So Bullseye appears on enemies more often, and the explosion size now scales with the size, which it didn't before, I guess. And Bush passive used to be 0.5% crit damage per level, separate from the 1% that Clank gets. So Clank has always gotten 1%. Bush got 0.5% on that. That has now been doubled from 0.5 to 1%. So now Bush gets 1% crit damage per level. Megachad now gets 2.5% damage every time you trigger a flex. Now it has a cooldown, obviously, and you do have to get hit in order to trigger it, but that's kind of his whole thing while he's flexing and vibing and chilling, right? So flex stops damage and then goes on cooldown. The cooldown goes down per level, so it can trigger more often because obviously there's more enemies anyways, but now you gain 2.5% damage when flexing. And again, I think the developers starting to realize that if we're talking about making these more equivalent, any of the characters that don't have passives that directly affect how powerful they get over time will just not be picked because, you need that element in order to make really strong builds. Next up, you'll notice that after the leaderboards reset, we actually have 2 Noelles on the leaderboard right now as it stands. Before, Noelle scaled duration per level, which wasn't really all that useful. Realistically, duration and attack speed kind of have this, dichotomy relationship between each other, because obviously if something lasts longer, you get more efficacy out of it, but if you shoot more often, it kind of matters less how much duration there is. So there's like this relationship between duration and attack speed in that relationship, but they just decided to abandon it entirely because duration just wasn't cutting it. So now Noelle gains size per level and also increased damage per currently frozen enemy. So size is a lot more universal, right? Because now a lot of like projectile based things, anything with penetration, anything with a lingering area, or any aura, which comes like Frostwalker is an aura type ability. It's just a ring around Noelle. Having it go with the starter weapon and also being universal across all weapon types is massive and gives Noelle a nice increase. And also because, she's is a girl, Noelle, you get, since you're freezing enemies from Frostwalker, you also get increased damage when enemies are frozen as well. So some nice synergy built in there. Duration's gone. It's now size and damage when they're frozen. And again, looking at the leaderboards, ever since people people figured out the dichotomy, like the relationship between getting more gold, buying items, combining those items, and realistically having really powerful items scales insanely well. And Robinette also just has been dominating the leaderboards in how strong she actually is. So the developer had to make a choice. The fact that the leaderboard is filled with full of Robinettes all over the place, this is the choice that he has made on how to actually balance that character and mix it up. So Robinette passive has been buffed early and mid game, but starts to gain less damage per gold after 200k gold. So this only really affects super late game runs. So basically trying to consolidate the value of that gold gain and the damage you get from it to early game and mid game so that you can benefit from having that, but making sure it doesn't scale too high, right? Having the damage scaling for just massive amounts of gold on Robinette was just an easy source of damage scaling. It could be that, you know, a lot more other characters need to be buffed to have this kind of, you know, value gain from having lots of gold in your inventory, or just damage from having some kind of passive that exists outside of the current ecosystem, right? Because you have opportunity costs between weapons and tomes on which ones you choose, but the character passives are just always active, and it's a choice of what character that you pick. So having that as an option is big there. So he says, I'm making this change so that we can see other characters on the leaderboards. It'd be nice to buff all other characters to become as strong as Robinette, but that's not something I can do overnight. So a short-term solution was just to nerf her passive late game for now. I like to eventually get in per character leaderboards now, which also kind of solves this problem, which it would be a great solution. It is a brand new system for one person to vet out and make, but having it per leaderboard is usually what character-based games do, because in the end of the, you know, at the end of the day, all characters are different and have different tops and bottoms depending on which, you know, how far they can go and how powerful they are. So having that as an option there would be really cool, but it's for the long term. At least in the near term, you know, having that end game damage gain less damage over time towards the later stages of your run means that Robinette is weaker than before, but as you can see after leaderboard reset, it didn't really make that much of a difference. Next up for Dicehead, got buffed a little bit. The rewards don't fall off as fast anymore. Previously his rewards were halved by level 25, now they're halved by level 50. So this passive, which allows you to get a random stat when you level up and the bonus that comes with that, it now will maintain its value throughout a longer run to give him more value. We have in the past seen very strong Dicehead runs regardless, but it is very much dependent on what that RNG turns into in the very beginning and how that grows. So giving you more time to hit the big lottery numbers on it means it's going to be a lot more valuable. Next for Calcium, buffed and simplified the passive on Calcium. This is kind of like one of those awkward characters, kind of like Birdo, where it's kind of neat, but the application is much harder to actually use. So Speed Dim is Calcium's passive. He's all about moving quickly, or as quickly as possible. So he gets lots of speed. He can get moving like a rocket ship, but it's halved when you take damage, and you gain damage based on your speed. This has been reworked, so now it gains 0.75% damage per level base, so regardless of how fast you're going, and then 0.5% per 1% of speed multipliers. This is applied gradually as Calcium approaches his top speed. So again, baking it in so that it's a little bit stronger early and mid, and also is less susceptible being stopped. That's the big thing with the Calcium build, is obviously if you get hit, or you lose a bunch of speed, or you run into a wall, or you get blocked by something, body blocked by an enemy, you lose a lot of your power output, which is like a double whammy, right? You got stopped, which means you're now in danger, but because you got stopped, you're now less effective at killing things, so you just get hurt twice as much. So that's kind of a nice change. The Ogre had a flat damage increase, 1% damage per level, but you compare it to some of the other damage per level valuations that the other characters get, it just wasn't stacking up, especially since you're kind of forced to use the axe, which in some cases can be kind of hard to use correctly depending on what stats you get. So the damage increase for that is going from 1% before to 1.5% per level on Ogre. Next, the Scarf got buffed. The Scarf used to be 33% more damage while airborne, and it's now 33% to 50%. So it went up a good bit there, a nice little increase for the amount that you get. It's like, what, a 50% increase for the amount that you have for that item, which, you know, might be kind of cool with Birdo. Birdo getting some damage while in the air. You can stack up some scarves. I know it's kind of hard to guarantee the higher quality items depending on the run you get, but it at least is nice. And again, kind of like calcium, it's something that has an on-off, right? If you get forced down to the ground by shades or you're not able to stay airborne, this turns off, which means that it is a damage increase that has uptime, right? It's not 100% uptime. It's not up all the time like a lot of the other items. So making this more powerful since it's conditional is a good idea. Next is a pretty big change. So Brass Knuckles was always deal damage to enemies that are nearby and was kind of useful for characters that got really close. I mean, in theory is designed for like the melee-based characters or aura-based characters, but obviously since you can control the space, it works for all characters, right? So having that as an option, and it's also nice that he's buffing some of the more common items that show up a lot more often. So the change here, if you don't know what this means, is Brass Knuckles damage scaling has been changed from additive to just a flat amount. Instead of increasing your current amount of damage based on like the scaling there, like it's, you know, based on the amount you have, it's going to scale based on that, which makes it more or less if you have a lot or a little. It's now just a flat 25% damage, which means that it's always useful. It's even more useful in the beginning because if you have a low damage value, getting 25% flat added onto it means that it's always going to be really good, even more so for early game. It just means it's a little bit more of an interesting option. Hopefully that they have stats on which items people are picking when they have a choice to pick. Sometimes it's random and you're limited on the scope, but just law of large numbers when you have a big sample size of players, having this scale off flat is super nice. And a really, you know, odd choice, but it makes sense. It's thematic. Spaceman no longer takes fall damage. So I guess Spaceman, because he's out in space and floating around, he can no longer take fall damage. Doesn't really have any major applications, again, unless there's a swarm that's throwing you up in the air and you fall down, or if you're on the forest maps and you jump off a big cliff. But maybe this creates some cool, interesting situations where the Spaceman can actually avoid taking fall damage or just jump around. Either way, it's just kind of thematic. Cursed Doll, another very common drop because it's at the lowest quality rarity, now curses more than one enemy, up to 5 enemies that are in range, which is super awesome. So every 1 second, it will now curse 5 enemies. This one is really nice for doing damage to big targets because it's percent of their max HP every second. However, because it's only 1 enemy every time it pulses, the likelihood as you go later into the game that the target that you want is the one that you want to hit is lower and lower, right? Because if you're in the middle of a swarm and there's enemies everywhere and you're trying to get the curse onto the boss by getting close to it, you know, it gets less and less likely the more enemies there are. This does give it an overall damage throughput for AoE. It's not going to be a massive thing because it's still 5 targets, but now that it's 5 targets every time it pulses, it means it's going to be a lot more reliable in hitting the big boss enemies or elites or challenges that you want to hit specifically because there's less room for error, because there's more room for error. Next, Calcium's theme is now extended and goes twice as hard. You can confirm that or disagree from that in your own game. Leaderboard reset is scheduled for 4 hours earlier every Sunday, so you just don't, so I don't have to stay up until 2 a.m. to verify everything is working right. Literally just being completely transparent and honest. It's not about you, it's about him. He just doesn't want to be up in the middle of the night to verify it, so just deal with it. Additionally, I've signed up for in GeForce Now and Steam Cloud Play. I'm not sure how long it takes to get approved, but it should be available there soon. There's been a request for a lot of people in the community looking for these to be added to the game. Again, solo dev is just one of the many things on a long list of stuff to do, so glad that he started the process. A small quality of life, but if you gain a lot of levels at once where it kind of has to go, like the game will stay paused, you'll keep clicking through screens. It used to only update the stats once the window closed, but because the window is not closing, the game's not on pause and you have multiple, you didn't see the final stats until you had to, you know, close the window down completely. So a nice little change here is that when you gain multiple levels, you can see the stats change in real time each time you pick the upgrade. So that means that you can kind of make that adjustment. If there's a breakpoint you're looking for or some stat you're looking at, it'll now adjust with every choice. Lastly, we got bugs. I'm just going to scroll through these so you can see. Fix the bug where the shady guy doesn't disappear. Fix the bug where HP gained from leveling didn't show in the stat screen. Campfire not going away. Standing next to a chest and getting enough money, but the text doesn't update. Shattered Wisdom didn't do any damage. Fix the bug where banishing every epic item would no longer grant any legendary items. That's pretty horrible. Fix the bug where Chaos Tome reward was multiplied by luck twice, and tried to fix an issue where some players couldn't get to play the game at all because the menu was bugged. One of these things might just be a persistent issue where they're just going to keep having to try getting more and more value out of it, but that lets you know that those are the bugs that are there and fixed up. And that's it. What do you think about the Megabonk patch? Again, it's, you know, you got to temper your expectations on the patch updates that come through. This is not a large development team of 20 to 800 people working on one patch. It's a single person that, you know, is working as hard as they can can, doing everything they can to make it work out. So just kind of let me know what you think about those, some balance things, and also what are the balance changes you're expecting? Like what items, what builds, what characters, what weapons are you expecting to be updated, next week and into the future that you think would make the game a lot better? Drop those in the comments down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.